So today I'm going to explain the most important topic uh, that is G20 summit, which was recently held in Bali. So we will discuss about uh, G20 summit. What's the stake? So, since the October 2021 summit in Rome, prospects of the global economy have worsened. What's on the table of G20 leaders as they meet in Bali to work toward finding a solution to the crisis? So, we will discuss and we will try to know about what a G20 summit bring to the table of the participants to get rid of crisis as we are facing. I believe the whole world is facing. So heads of state and government belonging to 20 of the world major advanced and emerging economies uh, will commence a 2-day summit meeting on Tuesday in Bali, Indonesia. This is the 17th annual summit and will be a culmination of numerous ministerial meetings and working groups that have been working for the past 1 year on key priorities. At the end of the meeting, India, represented by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, will assume charge of the G20 presidency. The 18th G20 summit will be held in India next year. So let's discuss what's on the agenda for 2022 summit. The Bali summit will have three key priorities. First, that is global health architecture. And the second is digital transformation. And third is sustainable energy transitions. So let's discuss the first global health architecture. So uh, this involves deliberation towards strengthening global health resilience and making the global health system more inclusive, equitable, and responsive to crisis. And the second one is digital transformation. So deliberation here have centered on achieving the full potential of rapid digitalization of the global economy by creating new landscape of cooperation among nations. And the third one is sustainable energy transition. That is, under this rubric, the discussion have focused on ways to accelerate the transition towards cleaner energy sources. In particular, since any such transition requires substantial investment, the effort have been focused on finding a platform for such investment. So, what else is at stake? So, we will discuss here. Since the October 2021 summit in Rome, prospects of the global economy have worsened between themselves. The G20 countries account for 60% of the world population, 80% of the world's GDP, and 75% of the world's exports. As such, they contain the engines of global growth. So it's very important, groupings. So, however, as the chart above we will discuss later, uh, sourced from a recent report of International Monetary Fund (IMF) on G20 countries, shows most of the G20 constituent countries have suffered significant output losses since the start of COVID-19 pandemic. India, for instance, would have lost almost 14% of its total output, the highest loss among all G20 countries. As we can see here, the report and the chart by IMF. You can see here G20 advanced country and in blue and G20 emerging country in red. So here the G20 advanced countries starting from Spain, Great Britain, Germany, France, Canada, EU, Korea, Australia, US, Italy, Japan, and then sorry, and then G20 emerging countries, that is India, Russia, Indonesia, Mexico, China, South Africa, Brazil, Argentina, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. So Turkey is in positive, very high, and here India is heavily impacted in the growing countries. In the advanced countries, Spain is heavily impacted. All are in negative, but Spain is heavily negative, and then Britain, and then keep on, and the least is Japan. So only Turkey in the growing emerging countries, Turkey is in positive, and Saudi Arabia is also positive, and apart from these two, all are in negative. Right. So as we said, we have discussed the graph, and the highest loss among all the G20 emerging countries is India. So we have prospect worsened, completely worsened. So there are many reasons why global growth and the promise of globalization have received a severe setback. For one, Russia invasion Russia's invasion of Ukraine has not only created massive geopolitical uncertainty but also spiked global inflation. Thanks to supply bottlenecks and curbs across a whole host of commodities, the associated sanctions by the West have further queered the pitch. Persistently high inflation at historic high in several countries has eroded purchasing power across these countries, thus dragging down emerging economic growth. 2. In response to high inflation, central banks across countries have raised interest rates, which in turn have dampened economic activity further. Some of the biggest major economies, such as the US and UK, are set to face a recession. Others, such as those in Euro area, are likely to slow down to almost a halt. 3. China, one of the major engines for global growth, is witnessing a sharp slowdown as it struggles with a real estate crisis. Lastly, the world economy is struggling with geopolitical rift such as the tension between the US and China, the two biggest economies in the world, or the decline in trade between the UK and Euro area in the wake of Brexit decision. We all know that. So where do the solution lie? So uh, for global prospects to improve, two things are certain. One, the G20 countries can grow faster if they grow together. Two, such growth in turn requires peace. Given the scope of G20 countries, the summit thus afford an opportunity for the leaders to find common ground and iron out the creases in the policy landscape. According to IMF, the overarching priority for policy makers in most countries is to ensure price stability while bringing down debt levels and protecting the most vulnerable. In other words, the first job at hand is to contain raging inflation, but at the same time, government have to find ways to help the vulnerable without necessarily ballooning the debt levels. A key concern in this regard would be to ensure the